What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Lab Insider. Today we're going to be taking a look at Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes' company. You may have heard of it. It's a biomedical or biotechnology startup company that claims it's found the key ingredient to all lab testing, minimizing the amount of blood we draw to a single little tiny vial and being able to do a wide variety of tests. Let's take a look at what that entails. So first of all, a little bit of a history. Elizabeth Holmes, who's the founder of this company, Theranos, she is, how you would say, I guess some sort of mogul, some sort of business mogul. She sort of came out of nowhere with this idea that you could, draw a small sample, a little tiny finger prick sample, few drops of blood in a little tiny vial, and that can test for a huge variety of illnesses, of diseases. Basically, Theranos will provide the equipment necessary in the laboratories to do this sort of testing with literally microliters of blood, which gonna have to drink my coffee for this, which is absolute bullshit. Any technologist, any scientist, any laboratory worker that's worked in a clinical setting knows that there is no possible way in hell that Elizabeth Holmes can actually test for 1,000 different diseases, or test, actually, to be honest with you, 1,000 different assays using one instrument. It's not scientifically, and more importantly, using it with I don't know, how would I say it, with such a small volume of blood. We all know it's not possible, and I'll explain to you why. But first, I'm going to take a look at what CNN report says about Theranos being sued now, because, cat's out of the bag. It's been out of the bag for a while, and a lot of investors are losing money on Theranos because of its false promises. So, basically, this is from CNN Tech, and it says, Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes is charged with massive fraud. So Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes, who promised to revolutionize blood testing, as I said, has been charged by the SEC with a massive fraud involving more than $700 million. $700 million worth of biomedical investments made to Theranos, which is her company. That is absolute bullshit, and she should be ashamed of herself for causing investors to buy into her bullcrap. So, it says here, former president Ramesh Balwani was also charged, so it's her and this guy, Ramesh Balwani. The two raised money from investors through an elaborate years-long fraud in which they exaggerated or made false statements about the company's technology, business, and financial performance. Theranos and Holmes agreed to resolve the claims against them, said SEC. Holmes will give up control of the company and much of her stake in it. Shut the company down. Shut it down. Maybe it's not as easy to do that, but shut it down, because it's clearly a fraudulent company. Essentially, this whole controversy that they created, it not only placed distrust in the population towards clinical laboratory testing, but it also propagates and promotes our profession in a terrible way, in a terrible light.
Oh god, no it doesn't. No, it most certainly does not. One drop changes nothing. Look at that little vial. You can't test anything. Oh god. Get her away from me. Get her out of here. Ugh. No. I don't want to see her face. I don't want to see her face. Oh, really? Sample processing unit? What does it have? Oh, a spectrophotometer. How genius. Thermal systems. Ooh, a flow cytometer. Great stuff. All genius. What else does it have? Material handling robot, wow, fluorescence-based isothermal detector, big stuff, sonicator, cartridge, centrifuge, thermal cycler. You know what it doesn't have? Reagents. Wow, look at that. You mean it tests everything on that little tiny vial with no reagents? Fantastic, look at that. Meanwhile, your investors are just crying it out, crying and sobbing for spending all that money to just watch your stocks plummet. Great job, Elizabeth Holmes. Really fantastic. Round of applause. Honestly, look at that face. Look at that guy crying. Is that what you want? Is that what you want for your scientific investors? To look like this man? I don't think so. Invest in real science. Think, people.
says here that the Silicon Valley startup, of course, Silicon Valley, California, was valued as much as $9 billion, and it was formed in 2003 when she was 19 years old. Now, Elizabeth Holmes is not a laboratory scientist by any means. She's not a medical technologist, okay? She doesn't have that qualification to work and to test in a lab, but she claims she's come up with this godly analyzer that can do all this with one drop of blood. She dropped out of Stanford University to launch her company. Wow, interesting. Alright, not saying that she needs the experience, but it would help if she had laboratory experience. It was considered an industry disruptor that aimed to create cheaper, more efficient alternatives to traditional medical tests. With what instrumentation, with what scientific technologies? She basically gave an idea. Yeah, it would be great if we had a technology that could take 50 microliters of blood from a finger prick and we could put it into a machine and it would work miraculously. But it doesn't exist. So it's all false pretenses, false promises. She's promising to raise money to work on an investment, on an analyzer, so she has no scientific backing. The scientists that work with her, they themselves don't have that technology available yet. And it makes no sense. The whole thing makes no sense. She essentially swindled her investors. And I'm trying to see, there was an interesting part about what Theranos actually was doing with some of the samples that they drew. Here we go. It says, Theranos misled partners about its technology, and it allegedly used modified third-party machinery instead of its own to process some tests. So, they draw patients' bloods in the promises that all the blood testing that they do, all the assays, all the analytes that they measure through their lab testing, they promise that they're going to do it using their analyzer. But what they don't tell people is that they're actually sending out some tests to third parties, basically to clinical laboratories, possibly hospital laboratories, not even private laboratories. So you're essentially paying for a service that's not being offered the way they've actually described to offer that service. It's swindling consumers, clients, patients, it's swindling investors. This is actually a ridiculous, ridiculous scam. And, you know, like I said, cat's out of the bag. This is not news to anybody. But I figured I'd bring this out there to people who maybe not heard of it, or for people who are interested in learning more about it. I'd also like to continue on this point with the third-party investors, because that's actually interesting. It says this SEC also said it lied about revenue projections and claimed to investors that regulatory approval for its testing technology was voluntary when it wasn't. Theranos compiled a binder for investors that included reports on clinical trials. It said it had performed with pharmaceutical companies, but only one of those reports was co-written by a pharmaceutical client, according to the complaint. 2 were written by Theranos employees, so they're even falsifying clinical trials. How freaking wonderful. Fantastic. Moreover, Theranos and Holmes made false and misleading statements in the press accounts to bolster their startup profits. Naturally, of course. Then allegedly used those articles to generate financial interest. So of course they've generated a whole hoo-ha of financial interest without any actual evidence, without any actual proof or scientific technology that they could actually use, and they've just swindled a whole bunch of people. Personally, she should be arrested. That's criminal, honestly. $700 million of investments for this company that is supposed to be some sort of startup company that's supposed to promote well-being and wellness to patients, and quick, effective lab testing through finger pricks, through capillary punctures, and using one analyzer that can do a multitude of tests using very small quantities of samples. This is all false. Don't buy into these lies. Honestly, as people of medicine, as people of laboratory science, and even as patients, we should all better inform ourselves when it comes to things like this, because when it sounds too good to be true, chances are it probably is. What are your thoughts on Theranos, guys? Let me know in the comment section below. This was a quick, brief Lab Insider on Elizabeth Holmes' Theranos. If any news breaks, I'll give more videos on it. Thanks. Stay tuned.